Good afternoon. Welcome to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton, back to open up with you about the latest on the dance scene and the heart of what moves us. Thank you for joining us today. It is so good, as always, to be with you. Welcome to this dance space. Well, friends, with the approach of the Toronto Caribbean Carnival Parade, we are entering today into a conversation that explores emancipation, ritual practice, history, and education. And I want you to consider this. There is a bigger and a grander meaning of Carnival. We need to continue to educate people about the culture, the roots, and the nuances of what that means. Those are the words of Collette Coco Murray, Artistic Director of Coco Collective. And coming up on the show today, Coco returns to the program with Ronald A. Taylor, Artistic Director of Ronald Taylor Dance, to discuss these critical explorations. And so stay tuned and stay locked in. We're going to take a break and be right back with both Coco and Ronald. You're listening to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. Welcome back to Turnout Radio. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. Joining me today, Ronald A. Taylor is the Artistic Director of the Toronto-based company Ronald Taylor Dance, formerly known as Cambrulé Dance Theatre, which was founded in 1993. Now, his talent was first nurtured by the late Astor Johnson of the innovative Repertory Dance Theatre in Trinidad. True to his Caribbean roots, his work fuses modern with folk and traditional ballet in a distinctive style which he describes as contemporary Caribbean. Ronald has successfully pursued a Master of Arts degree at York University, and in his capacity as a dance educator, he has taught at York's Faculty of Fine Arts and at designated school programs across Ontario, Western Canada, Belize, the USA, and parts of the Caribbean. Joining him is Collette Coco Murray, a multi-award-winning artist scholar, cultural arts programmer, dance educator, and arts consultant. With over 20 years in the Canadian arts sector, she specializes in Afro-diasporic dance forms from the West African region, Caribbean folk, carnival arts, and stilt walking explorations as Coco Moko Jambi. As an advocate for equity in the arts, her artistry extends beyond performance to teaching, arts education, mentoring, doctoral research, curation, community arts engagement, and publications. Ms. Coco Murray is her mobile dance education business, informed by her research and praxis in advancing cultural dance education, anti-racism in dance, and inclusion of African diasporic arts knowledge. It is my great pleasure to welcome both back to the show. Welcome, Ronald. Welcome, Coco. It's so great to be here with you. How are you both doing?
I am doing great. How are you?
Oh,
yes, and I am well also. It's nice to be back.
And I'm doing well too. You know, I'm always thrilled to sit down with the both of you because I know that it's going to be a conversation that's going to birth much fruit. And so I'm so grateful that you both said yes again.
This is part 3.
Yeah.
Well, yes, as Coco mentioned, today's conversation is a continuation of that part two discussion. This is part three. Part one and two occurred in 2022. So it's been some time since all three of us have had a chance to sit down together and we discussed at that time Caravana, a gift that was given to us in 1967. And before we have an opportunity to go back into that conversation, I do want to ask again, how are the both of you? Share with us, how is Coco doing?
I am well. This summer has given me a lot of opportunity to be Moko Jumbian all over the place. So I am well. I am in good spirits.
I'm so glad to hear that. We're going to be talking about some of the work that you have been doing too a little bit later in the show. So Coco, much to discuss where your practice is concerned. Ronald, how have you been doing?
I have been doing very well, mostly family life. Since my arrival in Canada, haven't had a free summer like I'm having now, and just returning back from setting a work in Trinidad. I relish the time to spend with family and friends, visiting various festivals. And also, I am well.
I'm so glad to hear that. I am very mindful of what the three of us had an opportunity to speak of. The last time we sat down, we spoke quite freely about the concept of rest. For the both of you, have you had time to do that as of yet this season? Have you had time to take rest?
I try where possible, but what happens is the artistic creation and excitement it draws me in. So I take those moments and then I retreat back into my moments of rest.
Yes. Well, for me, I have to take the rest now. The brains, the body, the mind, the spirit requires me to take rest. So I am enjoying that time down because I am heading into a very big production next year that, will require my total and absolute stamina and strength to pull it off. So I am enjoying this restful period.
And I hope that you as well, Ronald, will share with us, give us the exclusive and share with us about what's going to be happening for you next year as well. We'll
Yes,
come back to that as well
yes.
towards the end of our broadcast. I just want to take a step back and open up the space, if I may, to say this again, that today's conversation is a continuation of the discussions that we had in 2022, where we discussed at that time Caravana, which again was given to us in 1967 and now known as the Toronto Caribbean Carnival. What we discussed at that time was that this rich tradition is steeped in intersections that include ritual practice and history, resistance and celebration, but the intersections don't stop there as we acknowledge the abolishment of the Slave Trade Act and freedom from bondage. And so I'd like to open up today by exploring, if I may, the dancing body within that space in relationship to liberation from bondage. Coco, I'd like to start with you. You have done significant research in this area. And what I'm curious to know, if you can open up by sharing your thoughts on that relationship and the claiming of liberation in the dancing body.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I've been thinking about this over the past, I would say, year and a half, prompted by a research creation that I was doing as part of a project with the University of Waterloo, the Black and Free Project. So, as a commissioned artist, I was compelled to think about how would I describe my blackness and freedom. So, as a dance practitioner, I was it immediately drew me to what are the ways that my body engages in freedom? Yes, dance. But to explore a bit deeper is the transnational connections that I have to specific dance practices that are from the African diaspora, where my body is this archive that engages in these ethnocultural practices on the soil, in their locations across the transatlantic seas. So the body would engage in relationship to rhythm, to language, to vernacular, immersed in particular practices. So that project for me really was to think about ways that I could excavate ways that I have engaged in liberation or dance liberation. So, of course, tying with today's theme, when I go to present at research and conferences internationally, I'm always talking about dance and discourses and expressions about dance. So for me, when I'm in that space I claim that space and I talk about my dancing body or my practice or give examples of whatever subject matter I'm talking about. That whole relationship to me of engaging in the conversation at the conference or the panel, to me, that's liberating because you don't see a lot of Canadian practitioners who are Black that are doing that work. Then, when I travel and I engage in actual artistic practices, which are from communities. So, if I'm going to, for example, engage in carnival practices in the Caribbean, there would be Juve, there would be Festival of Holi. It would be Carnival Pretty Masquerade, but also Moko Jumbi explorations on the stilts. Um, so I kind of had to do a visual display of what that was in my research creation. I did this in March of 2023 since we last spoke and been speaking about it international conferences. The dancing body, we house a lot of vernacular. We engage in a lot of movement. And when I'm in these practices, it's liberating for me because I am able to claim the space, occupy the space. I'm in relationship with the music, with the environment, with the people in the community, and I'm dancing freely. There's no limitations. I can express myself in these cultural expressions in the soil with the community. So to me, that is empowering. It creates moments and hours of Black joy. I understand the context of why I'm doing it because it's in relationship to cultures that have been impacted. Our ancestors are speaking through the body, through the spirit. So it's not a surface activity for me. I take it seriously and I understand and I relish in those moments where I can continue to do it again. And that's my ritual practice in the contemporary sense. So I spoke about that, I guess, visually through my research creation. And it's called Unlock the Rhythms in My Body. So it really was like 5 artistic images of me engaged in these practices. And when I had my performance featured night, it was performance to contextualize the artwork. And then the artwork was displayed in museums. So there's an opportunity for people to see the artwork again in November in the Kitchener region. So I'm bringing what I do and in terms of my practice into my research and then also in research creation. So that's one of the ways that I express that we have dance liberation practices. When I go into schools and I'm teaching elementary school children about what's happening or what's to come up at this time of the year, so they have a little bit more context about liberation, freedom, It's beyond the parade that they may see of costumes going down the street. I'm contextualizing that conversation. And then I also want to teach them movement practice and them to think about, if I am engaged in freedom, what happens? Am I smiling? Am I moving with more energy? As opposed to just a mimetic approach of dance instructor and then you follow the movement. I want them to actually embody something and leave that dance class with a lesson about our diaspora and what carnival means in a deeper sense.
Excellent, Coco. Excellent. And
Wonderful.
Ronald, I'm curious to parlay off of what Coco shared. What are your thoughts as well about the dancing body in relationship to liberation?
Well, I have to say, to follow up with that, we had no other choice. We have, when we look at our ancestors, when we look at our parents who are now ancestors, whether it's in the palais and from the palais transported to the stage, is two variations. You get the liberation of the arms just simply open to the sky that ask you to communicate to the higher power, to the higher being. There's a dance called Fanga, which touches the forehead and it reaches to the sky. It touches the heart and it goes back up to the sky and it goes into a circular motion that everything is up in the sky. So we must be liberated from somewhere. We must look back, as the Sankofa bird represent, look back in order to know where you're going, what it is you're doing, what you are leaving for the next generation of people. When I teach, I also look for it in terms of liberation. I call it moments of light, acts of light. And with that, within me, within whoever is within the space, especially if it's diasporic people, you need not have a lot of conversation, because intrinsically, inactively, we somehow understand the meaning, especially when the body goes into a trance or it removes itself from where we are right now and we are transported to another place. That is something that we all experience, whether we are in a communal space, a spiritual space, a party, a classroom. We can transport ourselves beyond that limitation. So the dancing body happens from within. It's not outside, an outside expression it's an inward expression that goes outwardly. So the dancing body has a time and a place, and even sometimes the way we walk or the rhythm of our voices also interact with the music, interact with the dance, and sometimes we don't even know what is really happening. But if we allow that spirit to explore and communicate with the ancestors, we find, as Coco put it, as joy, dancing movements, lights, acts of lights, liberation.
Thank you, Ronald. When you say that we have no choice, it alerts me to something that Coco had actually also shared during our previous conversation about the way that our dances have been depicted. Coco, at that time, you had spoken about the fact that our dances have been depicted through the lens of colonialists. So as Ronald is talking about, we have no choice, I consider also the many intersections of embodiment. And I also consider freedom from social and political systems of oppression. So share with us, I want to stay with you for a moment, Ronald, if you can share with us your thoughts on how freedom from those systems of oppression can have an impact on our liberation?
Okay, the freedom of expression, they were done physically. But what I'm talking about, we have no choice. Let's pretend, and that's why a lot of it was taken away from us, because I think the colonial powers understood that the drum or a voice or a dance and a movement translates beyond our physical being. So that's why it was banned. Okay, the liberation of the body. You hear a drum and the heartbeat goes bubble, 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 and you build upon that, and there's something within it that touches your being, that opens you, the universe up to you. It opens the universe up to you. There is no greater feeling than that, to express yourself with joy, express yourself through liberation. So when emancipation came and we took to the streets, there was a whole flinging open of the arms. There I go again. And it's a welcoming of, okay, you might have me physically, but no more. But then there's also a liberation of the mind that we do not speak about. And that's where we are still, I believe, colonialized. And they talk about decolonizing, but is the liberation of the mind, sort of you going back to the practices of our people. And even though we live in a contemporary time, we have to bring it to where we are and to live it as a people in order to, again, have the acts of life, the communing of our community, the communing of the dancers in the diaspora. And what does that mean? And people do not understand that force, that spirit, that being that is inherent in all of us.
Coco, as Ronald was sharing about liberation, what I'm curious to know from you is, within the scope of what we were talking about, this lens of colonialism, can you talk to us about this freedom from social and political confines, social and political systems? Talk to us about that relationship with Carnival.
Well, we have our contemporary understanding of going through institutions, policies, infrastructures that sometimes are not built for us.
Mm-hmm.
We navigate these spaces every day and throughout our 365 days. So our body, our mind, and our spirit is always seeking these moments where can we just be? And how can we release tensions? How can we renew ourselves, renew our spirits? And within the context of Carnival, of course, we in Toronto, we don't necessarily wait until the parade in August or August 1st. This could be every weekend.
Yeah.
It could be a main event, it could be a concert in these subculture spaces that we form. We occupy spaces and gather. For myself, I would gather with other artists I may go and see another creative production. I may go outside and meet other colleagues, and we're going to practice on our stilts. The soca music is playing. We are going to find moments to occupy and engage in our liberation practices wherever we occupy. I start to talk about this in an upcoming publication that's tied to this whole idea of identity and freedom from what? Like artistically, we've been doing this for hundreds of years, but within the context of the colonial oppressions that we face and our ancestors have faced. So, in the contemporary lens, the diasporic carnival that we created within Toronto or the ones that we traveled to in the Caribbean, these are spaces where we occupy to release and be ourselves in our full totality, um, wearing costumes. Sometimes we can do performative interventions to challenge what people think and the notions of what they think carnival is. Last year in Toronto for 2023, I was with scholars and colleagues, and I was supporting this whole critical intervention of playing Blue Devil Mass with Moko Jumbies, which was juxtaposed, and it was an intervention from the pretty masquerade and the costumes that you would typically see. We were taking it back to the roots, and this is part of my colleague's research, her doctoral research, Natalie Wood, who's studying about Blue Devil Mass, or about Blue Devils, from Paramin, Trinidad. So to be part of that type of cultural intervention and how we occupy the spaces in the street and occupy space in the parade to show and take people back to these are the practices or examples of some of the traditional masquerade characters that may have been birthed out of social oppression and pain from the colonial lens and experience, but we still in the contemporary moment are showing that it's very important to us to educate people about it in the present. So that was the most liberating thing I ever did. It was great. So we always find these moments. We don't always necessarily have to wait until the carnival procession to do so. We can do so in multiple places. And I talk about that in an upcoming publication with Canadian Theatre Review about where Blackness and freedom occurs within a dance sense in Canada, and ways we do this and where it can occupy and where it lives. So
Thank you, Coco. It does take me to a share that I had provided at the top of the show where you were talking about the root, that we're moving away from the root of what Carnival is, what the nuances are, why it exists. And I want to come back to you in a moment because I would like to explore what you're sharing more as we look at the context of education. Before we do that, Ronald, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what Coco has just expanded upon.
Okay. I'm just going to go specifically to Trinidad, and I'm going to go specifically to Juve morning. That's after midnight, Carnival Sunday, into early Monday morning before Pretty Mass happens on Monday and Tuesday before Lent. There is speaking politically, speaking in satire, speaking with placards, speaking with very dramatic clothing, very dramatic portrayals of the political events that happen in the country or the social events that happen in the country. So we're talking about liberation, we're talking about Carnival and the roots. So within that, back in the day, the slaves or the former slaves used to make fun of the master and the mistress. Now, the master and the mistress will find that very, jokingly, or look what they're doing and whatnot. But in sense, we using our intellectuality to make fun of them. And in the character we call Dame Lorraine, which the posterior of the bosom, the posterior of the behind is used, and there's a whole dance surrounding it, talking about the attributes of the un-African people. So it's so we got to go back there. And then, as I said, the political happens because and they also say with calypso was the root where the griots came in from the African, and they would allow you, or they will tell you what's happening in society, so you could have an informed choice of what to make and what to do, either to vote the particular party out of power and bring in a new party, or you just go along with what basically is happening. So it goes back to that root of it, which we do not have a Juve in Carnival in Toronto. We have a Juve Fete, which is something vastly different to what it is I'm portraying, because in every city, in Trinidad has a Juve. And each of them, when you visit each of them, they could be saying different things. And the way it is portrayed, they usually use placards. And the way it is portrayed, it's jokingly, but yet it has a serious connotation to what is being displayed and what is being talked about, that represents the perspective of the African diaspora. And like in New York City, they do have one, but it also takes on a little much more color than the one that I'm talking about from Trinidad.
Ronald, expound upon the meaning of Juve for those who don't know.
It's called Juve, the break of day, where 4 o'clock in the morning, when the sun rises, they find themselves in the street as from Cambule. And Cambule came as the slaves were emancipated in 1838. Instead of the balls that the French planters, the Catholic French planters, were having in the house, when the slaves were emancipated, they took it to the streets. That is how Carnival derived, and over the years have shifted and changed. So Juve is a very important, as Coco mentioned, you get the Blue Devil from Paramin, you get Jab Molasses, you get Baby Doll, you get sailors and whatnot, various different characters that will only appear in Juve. And then you go on to the pretty mass of Carnival Monday and Carnival Tuesday. So Juve, and there are carnivals because they have, it depends on who you speak to. They will either have Brazil Carnival or Trinidad Carnival, either as one or two in the world. But it's the culmination of being frustrated and being oppressed, that liberating feeling of, you know what, I am just going to say what's on my mind. And, in other spaces, they don't know how to deal with that feeling. And sometimes when they think we're angry, we're not angry, but we're just expressing ourselves, but the masses that be, the power that be, do not understand that kind of a thing, because they find we all speak at the same time. But speaking at the same time, we still understand each other. And we could have arguments, but we could also come to some agreement, and somebody is shouting over there, but still having a conversation right within the presence. That is what's happening, at Juve. Here I am expressing a point of view that I am strongly against, or I am for it. And yeah, it's a whole it's very dramatic, very, very dramatic. There's a retelling of the Camberley riot in Trinidad, and when you see that, they have horses and the dramatization, where you see the soldiers and whatnot. A whole retelling on Carnival Friday in Trinidad to let us know this is the root of Carnival. This is Juve. This is where Carnival came from.
Another thing that happens within these practices is this notion of our masquerade traditions. So even within the social oppression, there's still this ritual practice of masquerade. So concealing the identity in Juve would be putting the mud on the skin, the molasses that are from the sugar plantations that they were working on, which creates that Jab Molassie character. Like putting yourself in the dark molasses all over your skin and concealing your identity. We have masquerade traditions that are coming from the Western African region. So there's elements of those intersections that are part of our rationale for these practices. Um, where there's masks and there's also a concealed identity with the stilt figure that's the protector, the Mokojumbi figure, right? So not necessarily you don't know the identity of the people. So that in itself has a deeper meaning too. Because if you're mocking, who's doing the mocking? Can you really identify who those individuals are? But it's a community of people that are coming together with their concealed identities, embodying a spirit of we have to express this common theme that we're expressing. You don't need to identify who we are. We don't need to be punished for this. We are claiming the space and we are expressing who we are within these carnival characters. We are talking about the socio-political issue that we are frustrated about, but we're doing it through dancing, movement, music cultures, through these embodied experiences.
Ronald and Coco, I'm reflecting on a talk that was held at the ROM entitled Emancipation Day, Canada's Past, Present, and Future. And in that discussion, Dr. Cheryl Thompson shared that 1965 and 1967 was an important juncture for the Caribbean community in the context of the development of the Caravana Festival. Dr. Cheryl also shared that changes in federal government policy on immigration widened both the size and the range of the community. And so as we consider the past, the present, and the future, Coco, I know that you have shared in past, again, this consideration of moving away from the root in explaining what the nuances are and why the Carnival exists. And so as we take a look at the statements that Dr. Cheryl shared in that very informative discussion, and as we look at the past, the present, and the future, when we consider education, Coco, How do we do this? How do we protect, maintain, and responsibly share the history of Carnival?
I would say it would take a number of us who are Caribbean scholars. Like we have a relationship with the Caribbean, but we're also in academia to do this level of education, whether it's trying to create courses at the university level. Um, I've been in panels where people are talking about the future of Black studies within university programming, and that's been an ongoing conversation amongst generations of Black scholars in Canada. So that could be an entry point to bring it in. There has been existing Caribbean programs, but then there's always, shifts and changes in departments where the courses may not be offered anymore. So it would take the tenacity of scholars to really talk about this, but also it would take what I'm seeing is there are artists and there's generations of artists doing their part to continue to share all aspects of carnival practices with children and youth, like the Caravana Arts Group. They've been doing a lot of Caravana arts camps for many years. Um, the generation that I come from, we try to bring it into our, performance practices. And as someone that works in community arts as well as in the education system, for me, the primary school education is where it's important, because if you start there, you can start the groundwork to really have the students unlearn some of the stereotypes they think about carnival and
Mm.
then bring in some informed information at that level. And then also, because I'm also in the dance sector, the other ways that I try to educate audiences is through performance. So, like what I just did with Toronto Dance Theater's seasoned end performance, I decided at their short and sweet series to present this West African and carnival practice of stilt dancing and introduce my Moko Jumbi dancing character in that way, to that audience, which has been predominantly for 50 years, it was ballet, modern, contemporary. So when you're seeing a practitioner in the dance sector that's bringing in another form, it's just disrupting their ideas of what they think the West African and Caribbean communities can offer in dance. Um, yeah, so I find different ways to just educate people, whether it's a panel, a conference presentation, publications, performance, education programs, community programs. So I find different ways to do that. It also means that there needs to be more collaboration between the carnival groups, seeking out educators like myself and
Mm.
others to work together to do the educating together, because we want people to learn about it, but some people may just want to give their version of what they think it is, but not really consult people who know it on a deeper level, right? So I think it requires more conversations across disciplines and across education levels for this to really work.
Indeed, the disruption of space stands out to me. And of course, those cross conversations that need to occur, that disruption stands out to me. Ronald, I'm curious, your thoughts as well on protecting, maintaining, and the responsible sharing of history.
Coco spoke on a lot of varying topics, so I'm just going to keep this short. Is that the powers that be in terms of the circuit, the academia and the political and the social, in commentaries, they need to get the history of the carnival. Yes, protect it, but it must also be shared by the children in the various institutions, starting from the primary school all the way up to the university level. And as Coco says, to dispel all the myths and whatnot that was shared about it. So and that would not happen within a year or two. Maybe within 10 years, you're going to see a shift in it, because nothing happens basically overnight. But for me, do the proper research in order to speak profitably about the carnival, what it represents, where it comes from, the various roots of carnival, because there are carnivals all over the Caribbean, and each of them has their own distinct flavor, But Trinidad Carnival, and correct me if I'm wrong, Coco, has spawned a lot of carnivals around the world. And each, when you go to Notting Hill, when you go to New York, when you go to, but each of them must, and in Toronto here, in Canada here, must adhere to its roots. It must adhere to the elders, because we in dance, we heard about King Louis XIV and whatnot, who our dance practitioners were, who in the Jab, in the Jab Malassi, the Dame Lorraine, speak about Bella Rosette, her American name, Beryl McBurney, in terms of what it is she did to preserve the dances of the Caribbean. Rex Nettleford in Jamaica, even Jamaica has a carnival now. They didn't used to have one. So it's for me, is to find the root cause of carnival, and dispel it widely. But to understand it, academia, writings, and whatnot, so it could be put into libraries. So when the kids want references, and it's not everything that you see online is correct. There's a lot of information online that isn't, because whoever wrote it has a one-sided view. But it must be a wide, is like an umbrella. So when the rain falls, it falls at the feet. It trickles down from the heavens, it falls on the umbrella, and it falls on your feet, and in order to refresh and enlighten.
So does philosophical discourse and theorizing dance practices have to do or play into this conversation?
Go, Coco.
I think it does, because we don't see a lot of context around the dance vernacular and its relationship to the carnival practices fleshed out fully in the Canadian context. I think it does need to be explored and examined, also performed, so people don't see only one type of what they think Caribbean folk practices are, or contemporary forms of Caribbean dances, but also not just the Anglo Caribbean. We have also the French Caribbean. We have different ethnocultures across the Caribbean. So it's not only African diasporic. They also need to see that range as well, and those dances as well. So there's a lot of rich history that is yet to be tapped into in terms of the dances and the cultures that surround and have formed, influenced those actual dances and rhythms coming from the Caribbean.
Yes. My father once said to me that the cemetery is the richest place on the face of the earth, because there's so much information that is buried in the cemetery. But I say, just piggybacking on Coco, it's before it gets to the cemetery, we need to find its places. We need to find the custodians of the culture and sit at their feet so that they could tell us their stories. But I think what it is that we often find that the other is more important. The other is the diamond of it. It shines so brightly that we go. But modern dance, Black modern dance in America, has its roots in folk, Caribbean folk dancing. And I just mentioned the name of Beryl McBurney. Her American name was Bella Rosette. And what it is she did, like Catherine Dunham, also traveled the Caribbean. So there is a wealth of information in the Caribbean dances that has influenced a whole generation, and it will continue to influence. So what you said is right, and I don't know where the conversation needs to start. I shouldn't say where it needs to start, because I think it goes, I talk about the raindrops and the refreshment of the land. It needs to start in the school, like everything else, like your ABC. The dances need to have its own ABC, its own session, its own class time, in order for it to flourish and grow.
As we move to a close of today's conversation, I must talk to both of you about your individual practices, what you are working on, and how you are exploring these conversations through your practices. And so, Ronald, let's start with you. Talk to us about what you have coming up.
I am exploring a duet about Tutankhamun and his wife, and it's called Royals. How young love comes together, it moves apart, and the only prop that I have within it is a stool that represents the seat of power. And in it, I want to give equal sharing of that power between Tutankhamun and his wife, even though he died pretty young. But, we are very fascinated by his life, his young life. And the story goes that he also married his half-sister, which was very common back in those days, so that they keep the royal blood. So that's coming up on the horizon. And then in terms of my travel, my home company, which is the Astor Johnson Repertory Dance Theater, I am due to go back to Trinidad to set a work called Broom, The Broom, and talking about the many ways that the broom sweep through our lives, in love, in hate, in joy, in despair, but eventually it cleanses our life. It cleanses space so that the spirit could be exalted. So those are the two things immediately that I am working on. And the bigger piece, you're going to see it on social media and whatnot to come from Ronald Taylor Dance for its 32nd anniversary.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Ronald. And we also want to invite our audience to visit turnoutradio.com after this broadcast, where they can find out how to find you and also learn more about what you have coming up.
Yes.
Sir Ronald, thank you.
Yes.
And Coco, if you can share, please. What do you have coming up?
So what's upcoming for me is some research and publications, pretty much stepping back to see what can come out of a work that I did in March 2024 with the Gardner Museum. I had, did a version of a piece called Calabash with Coco Collective. Just want to explore where that could possibly go. In November, it will be the Black and Free. It's going to be its second year of inviting artists to, of course, answer that question on Blackness and freedom. And there'll be a museum exhibition in Kitchener. So the visual work of the dance liberation practices would be displayed. So that will be the Unlock My Rhythms in My Body will be displayed there. Coco Moko Jumbi is going to be seen at a number of different events over the summer. And if anyone is attending the carnival, just look up in the sky and see if you see a Moko Jumbi that looks like me.
I love that. I love that. And I know that both Ronald and I have had an opportunity to celebrate with you in
Yes,
past. Yes.
yes, 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 yes.
And I do want to draw attention to where individuals can find you both. Ronald, your website, please.
www.ronaldtaylordance.org and on social media, Ronald Taylor Dance.
Thank you, Ronald. And you, Coco.
www.misscocomuray.com. And on social media for Instagram and Facebook, it would be Miss Coco Murray, Coco Collective TO. And a new page on Instagram is Coco Moko Jumbi.
Thank you. And all of those handles, as well as social media references, websites, will also be placed at turnoutradio.com following this broadcast. And listen, I want to thank you both. I do. I want to thank you both for taking this time to share with us again. Always such a wonderful pleasure to be in conversation with the both of you. The Toronto Caribbean Carnival is occurring, the parade that is occurring on August 3rd. Will I see you both there?
Yes, in some form.
Look up in the sky.
Yes. Well, I'll be on the ground. Because I haven't attempted Moko Jumbis as yet, but I've also, talking about that in a past production, I've also used Moko Jumbis, and it's something about the Moko Jumbi that always gets people in awe of it. The heights and the things that could be done at 12 foot, 6 foot, whatever. It's always an awe-inspiring, exciting time for the audience. So see Coco and see me, with our various endeavors.
I love it. I love it. I do. Well, again, I want to thank you both for taking time to share today. And we do want to remind our audience as well, there are more events outside of the parade that's happening on August 3rd. And we invite you as well to explore torontocarnival.ca. Share your thoughts with us as well following this broadcast. To you, Ronald, and to you, Coco, such a pleasure, as always. Thank you for being here on Turnout Radio.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for another riveting conversation.
Yes.
Truly a pleasure. Thank you. Today you've been listening to the sounds of Cannonball Adderley with Autumn Leaves and John Coltrane with Blue Train. Welcome back to Turnout Radio on CIUT 89.5 FM. That was Ronald A. Taylor and Collette Coco Murray. What a pleasure to sit down with both on today's broadcast. Folks, if you missed the top of the hour, we invite you to visit turnoutradio.com and CIUT.FM, where this episode will soon be streaming. Technical production of today's broadcast was facilitated by Amber Downey-Back. Thank you for joining us. What a pleasure it was to share space with all of you. Join us again next week for more of Turnout Radio right here on CIUT 89.5 FM. I'm Nicole Inica Hamilton. I hope your week finds you turning out to dance.